Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to the Reptile Barn. I was just getting Cassie out of her other enclosure to separate her from the male, as we always do for feeding. And something interesting happened, and it made me think about differences, I guess, between different types of pets. So, um, you'll hear people sometimes when they have a very friendly, well socialized reptile call it like a puppy dog. They're like, oh, this one's just like my little puppy dog. It's super friendly. Um, it never bites. Whatever. It trusts me. I trust it. We kind of understand each other a little bit. Whatever the case may be. And this is true to an extent. Um, a well socialized Superdorf retic or almost any reptile, especially these captive bred ones, can be really delightful pets. Um, so I'm not saying that's not true. However, I was thinking about the difference between, let's take a snake and a dog. Okay. So what happened was she's obviously very hungry. It's feeding time. That's why I was getting her out to put her in here. I unpacked a large rat order today. So I handled well, at least hundreds of rats, maybe thousands. And, the smell of it, I've washed my hands since then, but the smell of it is on me. It's on my arms, it's on my shirt. And those two things, her being very hungry since it's food time, and then the smell of rat all over me, uh, definitely changed her behavior. So when I first got her out, she's very, very curious, tongue flicking like crazy. She's looking everywhere. Clearly she looks at me and her eyes are saying, well, that's just a human. That's my person that I know. But her olfactory sense input is telling her there is food. I know there's food, right? So the longer I have her out, the more agitated she is getting, and she gets to the point where she is turning her nose inward, pushing on my skin, on my arm, obviously, not on my face, and like her mouth starts opening, and I'm like, whoa, she's gonna try and eat me. She's the friendliest snake. Love this animal. She's never bitten, but that food instinct was starting to take over. She could smell it very strongly on me. My skin is warm, and this is a species with heat pits. She's very hungry, been thinking about food probably for days, and she was getting very, very close to taking an experimental bite on my arm. And so I grabbed a snake hook, and it was fine, and I just used the snake hook to move her, and no harm done. But then I was just thinking about it. I was like, she's not a puppy dog. She's a very good animal, right? An excellent animal. Well behaved. Under most circumstances, very trustworthy. But there is a level of domestication that dogs have reached that no snake anywhere on earth has reached. And I would argue this point with anybody. Um, Dogs have true domestication where they rely on their humans. That is not normal. They've done studies where they raise wolf pups and dog pups in the exact same environment, same handlers, same food, same schedule, same toys, same everything. And those wolf pups, as they grow, they're very, very friendly. They're not biting anybody. They're playful. They're learning tricks and all that. But when the people running the experiment would take a bowl of food and set it outside of the enclosures that these two different groups of puppies were in, the wolf pups were just trying everything to get through the bars. reaching paws, chewing, trying to dig, whatever the case may be. It never once occurred to them to try and convince the handlers to give them the food. The puppies that were dogs, they tried for like 5 seconds, and then they just sat staring at the people making vocalizations, whimpering, the whiny sounds the dogs can make, clearly trying to get their people to give them the food. The domestication process typically, you know, takes thousands of years. We've been working on dogs and on a few other species, cattle, for example, for a very long time, much, much longer, and many more generations, and a lot more purposefully selecting for a docile nature than we have with any snakes. Even, corn snakes or ball pythons that have maybe dozens of generations now in captivity, it doesn't even come close to what we've done with true domesticated animals. And now I'm going to have people who are like, okay, but dogs bite people. Dogs have attacked people. What are you talking about? They're more domesticated. And I'm going to get other people that are reptile people that are going to have examples of a snake that even in extreme circumstances of being hungry, food all over the place, the smell of food, they still don't do what I was describing Cassie as doing. And they're going to think that this means that I'm just wrong. I don't think that's the case, because what we're talking about is kind of the default. Your basic dog is going to be fully trustworthy. Anything outside of that is an exception, right? Your typical dog is people friendly. Your typical dog looks to humans for shelter, food, play, etc. Your typical dog does not even bite when pain is involved. Most dogs you take to the vet, they're getting shots, they're getting things that don't feel good, and they might whimper, they might be scared, but they're not fighting. You try this with a cat. Most cats are trying to tear the vet to pieces. So then you come back with snakes. The typical captive bred snake, if I have a rat in my hand, snake has gone ballistic. Snake is going to be striking, rapping. Even if he hits my hand instead of the rat, instinct takes over. And that's just how it is. You can maybe point to some exceptions, but your typical dog is fully domesticated. Your typical snake is not. And so none of this is to bash on snakes. I love snakes. I will always love snakes. I look forward to the continuing domestication process of snakes. And it's not a fair comparison because dogs were already a hypersocial species. Most canids excel in interspecies understanding. Think of wolves that evolved in the same biome as other top predators like grizzly bears, mid-tier predators, a range of like climates and stuff. So they form these family groups. They're social. Communication is huge within most canids. I realize that snakes are not like that. They're not this super, super social species to begin with. By most measures, they're a little less intelligent. I get that. All I'm saying is almost all animal lovers tend to anthropomorphize, right? We kind of project human ways of thinking and feeling into our pets that may or may not be true. But we also, us reptile people, and really kind of the exotic world of animal keeping that isn't your traditional pets, we also, it's not anthropomorphizing because it's not human based, but we tend to project behaviors of our more domesticated animals into our reptiles that may or may not actually be present. And I think this does the animals and some new keepers a disservice. This is not a big animal. She's long, but she's not a big animal. If I mess up and I get bit by her, I'm fine. I wouldn't want to get bit by her, and I wouldn't want my kids to get bit by her, but we're safe, right? But there are some reptiles that is not the case at all. And the vast majority of the time, people keeping that sort of reptile, crocodilians, the larger monitors, the really large pythons and boids, obviously venomous species, all that stuff. The vast majority of the time, the keepers are very experienced, very educated, very cautious. There are exceptions, right? There's not going to name any names, but there's plenty of people on YouTube free handling their venomous species, and that's their choice. I don't care if they do that, but I'm certainly not going to. Um, and they talk about they have this bond with the animal. They understand and they can read them. That's fine, but almost every single one of them has had at least a couple of incidents where it didn't go right. These are not domestic animals yet. We're working on it. I suspect we are partway there. We've made good progress. This is my last point and then I'll end. Even when we got started in reptiles, which is only 10 years ago, but especially you go back further than that, certain species had bad reputations as far as handleability, how socialized they were, how bitey they are, musking, all that kind of stuff. And certain species had good reputations. Reticulated pythons had a terrible reputation. Everyone who wanted a big python was getting berms, and because they're a puppy dog, right? A puppy dog tame. Um, I don't know what happened exactly, other than the fact that more and more and more of the retics and the other species that have that bad reputation that were being purchased, more and more and more of them, a higher percentage of them now, are captive bred animals. They have no parasite load that's causing kind of a constant stress. They've never had any sort of predation events where they have to flee and fight for their life. Um, they've never experienced the wild, so captivity doesn't seem foreign to them. And I would also argue that even genetically, the domestication process has begun. We just even subconsciously select our favorite animals to hold back as future breeders, and our favorites tend to be the nicest tempered animals. So, of course, domestication is beginning. I don't know how far it can get with a reptile as opposed to a dog or a cow or a cat or a ferret or whatever. But we've seen massive progress just since we started 10 years ago. That's nothing. 30 years ago, only crazy people were keeping retics. Right now, it's like one of the best large snakes that you can own. They're fabulous. If you pay attention to their real high food drive, then other than that, retics are spectacular animals if you're equipped for a large snake. So that's all. That's all I wanted to talk about, is just kind of not a warning. You guys don't need me to warn you of anything, but my thoughts on how tame or domesticated really are these animals. And my opinion is we're not there yet. But yeah, that is all. I hope that something in there made sense and was enjoyable. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, we're the Reptile Barn.